Hello and welcome to this James the Bike Guy, where today we've got in front of us here the brand new Gen 5 version of the Trek Dual Sport. Now this Dual Sport is the Dual Sport 3, which means it's the Mac Daddy version, the top end flavor of this really cool do-it-all hybrid. And in this video we're going to talk about what they changed for the new generation of Gen 5, and then we're going to find out exactly what it weighs. So if this kind of thing is interesting to you, stick around and consider subscribing if you find value in what you see. Trek Dual Sport. Now the Dual Sport itself has been a super popular hybrid for Trek. And in fact, it's a category that you see a lot of different bikes out there that are really getting into allowing you to purchase one bike to kind of do it all as long as you're a recreational rider. But I should say that recreational riding can expand a bit more, because this could also be a great commuter bike if you needed something a little chunkier and a little more solid than, say, Trek's FX series, which is their fitness commuter. But instead, this is what's considered a dual sport style bike. That means the positioning is a little more upright than an FX. Seat tube angle is a little more slack, but not quite as slack as their comfort bike called the Verve. And then they dial both the performance of that fitness bike and a little bit of comfort in with these giant 50 millimeter wide tires. Now these big old 50 millimeter wide tires get mounted up on a 650B wheel, which is a different size than most hybrids, and it's taken from the mountain bike side of things. Now, Trek has done that, but they've also made a big change right here. What's that? Well, we are missing the suspension that used to be in these bikes. Now, Trek has pulled suspension from all of their dual sport models, and that, I believe, is an intentional decision, because the front suspension on a dual sport bike often adds a lot of weight, it adds some cost and some complexity as well. And so by going to a rigid front fork, you can lighten up the front end of this bike considerably, but then you also have the benefit of having these giant 50 millimeter wide tires. And with that 650B rim, you can see the tire profile is quite tall. And that's a big difference for ride quality, because you can get a lot more ride quality out of tire choice than you can virtually anything else on the bike. I should mention that I've done a review on the Dual Sport 2 Gen 5, which is quite a bit more detailed, so feel free to click on that above should you want to check that out, because in this level, we're just going to stay on a high overview. Now, the frame that they're using here is what they call their Gold Alpha aluminum. That means it's shaped in butted tubing. You can see some of the welds are kind of finished off a bit, and one of the things I really like about how it happens is you've got integrated cable routing. So the cable routing comes in through the head tube, goes down the down tube and out back to your shifting out back, or down the fork to the front brake on this bike. But it connects all that up in a way that is almost seamless and really quite clean. Makes the frame much more aesthetically pleasing in my opinion. And then you can also see the handlebar, that cockpit area is just so much more slick. And aside from the ability to have all that tucked in for good looks, it does also allow you to be able to do a couple of things with the frame. First piece being, when you put this on a car rack, you don't have any cables to contend with, nothing worrying about pulling off or breaking, but then they can also run these mounts on the underside of the top tube. That means frame bags can get installed in this bike just like a gravel bike. You've got down tube and seat tube water bottle mounts, which is super awesome to see. On the back, if you were going to use this as a commuter, it's got a spot for an Abus Cafe style lock, and then you do have mounts for a traditional rack setup. All very good features if you're going to use this bike as one bike for the mall, because you're going to get a lot more commuter capability out of this than, say, a mountain bike would. It's going to roll a bit faster, but you also have more off-road capability than, say, that FX style fitness bike. Other things to talk about in the cockpit area is, of course, going to be, it's all aluminum handlebar, aluminum stem. You have these nice ergonomic grips, great to have on the bike. You're then set up with some Shimano hydraulic 2-piston calipers on the front and the rear. And out back, you're perched up on this Bontrager commuter saddle, mounted up on an alloy seat post. Now, that seat post can be swapped out for a suspension seat post or a carbon post if you wanted some extra compliance and comfort out of the bike. And when we roll down to the drivetrain, This is going to be one of the big changes for the Dual Sport series. Prior Dual Sport models ran multi-rings up front. In fact, the Dual Sport 2 and 1 both have doubles up front, but this has gone to a single ring up front and out back, an 11 to 46 tooth 10-speed drivetrain. That drivetrain gives you a nice wide range. It also means that you're going to have a lot less complication in this drivetrain, makes it a touch lighter. Of course, it also makes it a bit more reliable. The back is shifted through a Shimano Deore derailleur, which is pulled straight off of a mountain bike, and in the center is a threaded bottom bracket, which is the preferred way for easy maintenance and durability. Last things to mention on this bike, along with the rack and bag mounts, this is compatible with fenders, so you can run a fender up front and in back, and you can run up to a 650B by 2.0 inch wide tire. That means this back end has lots of additional room, lots of room for compliance, and just an overall pretty cool setup. I think it's time we find out what this bike comes in and weighs. And the actual weight of the Trek Dual Sport 3 in a size large is going to come in and weigh 27.62 pounds. Well, thanks for joining me to check out this 2023 Trek Dual Sport 3 Gen 5. Go ahead, let me know your thoughts down below. Would you take this over the prior Gen 4 variant, or would you go for this one, a little bit lighter flavor, a little less suspension, but an increase in capability and tires as well? Thanks again, hit subscribe, and see you in the next video.